we have an expert with us here today, Sophie Alcorn. And Sophie really is a true leader in the immigration law space, and it's special and a treat to have her here. She's also been a friend of our campus, and before COVID happened, we had the pleasure of having Sophie speak on campus to students in person. And once this is all over, we're going to have her on campus again. So she's extraordinarily knowledgeable about immigration law and has just an added layer of expertise into the deep knowledge of Silicon Valley as well as the tech industry. So TechCrunch has recognized her as a certified expert lawyer in the space. And as you know from reading her bio, Sophie Alcorn is the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law, which is the fastest growing immigration law firm in Silicon Valley, and 2019 Global Law Experts Award Law Firm of the Year in California for entrepreneur immigration services. So she's extremely well regarded in the space, a range of topics from technology to entrepreneurship. And today she's going to speak to students as her audience. So now, obviously, this week is quite a big week, obviously, with it being the election. And we were not quite sure how today would look. Of course, there's still news.
We're still not sure.
Still aren't sure, exactly. So not sure the outcome of the election, but it's quite timely to have Sophie here with us today, as we know immigration is a hot topic always for election years. So the way our talk will go today is Sophie has some slides that she's going to present from, and then a number of you submitted questions in advance. So we'll be sure to address some or as much of those as we can. And of course, you're always welcome to submit your questions using the Q&A feature of this webinar at the bottom of your screen.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Lauren. It is so awesome to always be able to come back to CMU over these, I guess, years now maybe, and different times of life. So thank you. Thank you for the relationship. It's a pleasure to support the community, faculty, students. Happy to be here. So much to talk about today. And I know you guys have a ton of questions, and I want to make this as valuable for you as possible. So I have a lot to cover in a constrained amount of time. I've used the same slide deck to speak for 3 or 4 hours, but I'm going to try to keep my remarks to about 20 to 30 minutes so we have lots and lots of time for your questions. And so feel free to just, sprinkle your questions in throughout. And if I see them, and if they're on topic, I'll answer them during the presentation. And otherwise, Lauren can ask me at the end. So just before we get started, you heard my bio, just a little bit about our firm, Alcorn Immigration Law. We're in Mountain View, so we're really close to your campus in Silicon Valley. And I'm just super proud of our team and that we've had such phenomenal success rates, even during the last 4 years of the current presidential administration. And our story is that my dad was an immigration lawyer. My mom is an immigrant from Germany. And so I grew up, hearing my dad's stories about how he got to help people from all over the world. And it really inspired me. So the mission of our firm is to transcend borders and expand opportunity and connect the world. And we want to help empower you to live your dreams because we know you're going to change the world. And you heard about me from Lauren, so thank you. And just a glimpse of our team. We're all either immigrants or children of immigrants or married to immigrants. It's deeply, deeply personal for all of us. And we've been delighted to support a lot of major VCs and a lot of top people from top companies in Silicon Valley. So, okay, let's dive in. So I'll just set the stage with some immigration context for you. If you're here, you're probably on an F1 student visa. Maybe there's a couple J1 stragglers in the mix, but most of you probably have dealt with F1 status at one time or another. And the typical path that most people are aware of is to go from a visa F1 or H1B and then later try to get a green card and then later become a citizen. Something also to know in this COVID world is that you don't have to have a visa to get a green card. So if the way life plays out is that you're required to go back home after graduation for some time for family circumstances or other reasons, you could potentially still get yourself a green card even from being back home. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about, is how you can do that. So the bottom line is, having a valid current visa is not a prerequisite to getting a green card. And here's probably the typical path for most of you. You're on F1. Perhaps your program offers some form of CPT, curricular practical training, so you can do a paid or unpaid internship or summer job while you're a student with your F1 I-20. And then when it's time to graduate, most of you will, if you haven't used all your time, still register for your 1 year of regular OPT, optional practical training. It's a work permit. You can be self-employed. You can volunteer and not make money. You could work at somebody's company. You could be a consultant in your field. You have a lot of flexibility for that 1 year of OPT with the types of jobs that you could do. You could found a startup as well. And then I think most of you probably would be considered STEM eligible. So that would give you an additional 24-month OPT STEM extension. So you get another work permit that's valid for 2 years. And this one is employer specific. You can only work for companies that are supervising you, helping you reach milestones on a training plan, and the company has to be enrolled in the E-Verify system. So that's easy for a lot of big employers. It doesn't really work for being self-employed, but it is possible to set things up with your own startup to allow you to qualify for STEM OPT at your startup. And then most people historically have wanted to get H-1Bs, but if you've been reading the news in the lead up to the election over the last several weeks, you've probably seen that there's been a number of H-1B visa topics in the news lately over the last few weeks. So I'll be addressing that a little bit later on. But that's the typical student dream. Come to a US university, get a job offer, have the company get you an H-1B, and then when you're working at the company, have them sponsor you with the perm process and an I-140 petition in EB2 or EB3. These are all these like keywords that are thrown around in that world. It's basically an employment sponsored green card through a company. And then whenever your turn in line is current is when you would go through the adjustment of status process to actually get your green card. And then once you've had a green card for 5 years, if you want, you could apply to be a US citizen. So it's the typical journey. Not everybody follows it, and there's a lot of other creative, strategic things that you could do around this topic, but that's just the standard path. Now, in terms of getting a green card one day, because for many of you, that's your major goal that you're focused on, just remember there's 3 different ways to get a green card. I'll be focusing on the business immigration options today, but there's also family-based immigration. I'll have a note on that, on getting married. And then if you're eligible, I think right now the diversity visa lottery is open. So if you're a citizen of a country that has low levels of immigration to the United States, you can easily just put your name in this free lottery and see if you get selected to get a green card next year. Okay, so H-1Bs, super hot topic. So let's spend a few minutes talking about the basics so you all are aligned in what they are and how they normally work, and then we can talk about the variations. So an H-1B visa is a visa for a specialty occupation. That's a technical phrase in the law, but you can think of it like being a professional job, a job that requires a bachelor's degree. And that means that if you don't have, I think you all have a bachelor's degree. If you don't, there may be a way to use work experience to compensate for some of the missing educational time. And another important component of this is that the company has to have the ability to pay you the prevailing wage, which depends on the geographic location of the work being done. So if you're going to be a computer systems analyst in Mountain View at an entry-level job, you're going to have a different wage than an architect in Pittsburgh who has 15 years of experience. So it's calculated based on geography. job type and job experience. And H-1Bs are a hot commodity because they are limited in the law by Congress. There's 65,000 available each year, plus a lot of you would qualify for this. There is an additional set aside of 20,000 that's available for people who get master's degrees and PhDs from US institutions. So that's really wonderful because it basically gives you 2 chances at the H-1B lottery in a given year for a single company that's sponsoring you. And historically, because the demand is higher than 85,000 a year, there has been a lottery. Now, when I became a lawyer 10 years ago, that was in the recession, and demand was very low, and there was no lottery because way less than 85,000 people applied on day one. But for the last 5 years, since I've been practicing in Silicon Valley, the numbers have crept up to over 200,000 people per year applying. But now there's COVID and high unemployment, so it's a different situation. And if you can find a company to sponsor you in the upcoming March, April 2021 lottery, you will have a much higher chance than you would have in prior years. This year, at the beginning of COVID, there were actually very few people who followed through on their applications. So a second lottery was held in June for people who were still in the system from winter. And if you have a job offer already for after you graduate next year, it's very valuable to ask the employer to put you in the H-1B lottery this year before you graduate, before you even get OPT, just to see if you have a chance at getting an H-1B, because it's such a valuable type of visa to have. Now, this year they changed the lottery. They made it electronic. It worked really well. It was only $10 for each company to put one person in. So that also helps you negotiate with companies to sponsor you. I mean, they could hire a lawyer to help them. We charge for our time for that. But if they want to do it themselves, it's just $10 to have your name put into this lottery system now. So some employers that might have old experience with H-1Bs don't know this yet. So it's an opportunity for you to educate them. The earliest possible start date on any H-1B in the lottery is always October 1st. So if you're sponsored this year, the very earliest your H-1B could start is October 1st, 2021. And if you run into a situation, like if there are any alumni on the call, if your third year of STEM OPT is ending, let's say in July of next summer, before the October 1st start date, there's this special thing called CAT gap, so that you get to keep working in the United States after your STEM OPT expires while you're still waiting for an approval on your H-1B. And an H-1B is generally valid for up to 6 years, but it can be extended beyond that if the company has sponsored you for a green card, which is very important if you're from a country with historically long green card wait times, such as India or China. That's something to pay attention to. So immigration has been in the news a lot lately. The latest, as of just within the last few days, is that there's a proposal to make the H-1B lottery to change the lottery to incentivize the highest paid international workers. So instead of it being a random lottery, the people with the highest salary, the highest wage level 4 would get selected first, and then the people with wage level 3 would get selected next, and so on and so on. There's been a lot of litigation in this area in the last few weeks, and I don't know if the administration, well, okay, so not to get too political, but Obviously, we still don't know the results of the election, but if Trump's the president, he's going to undo all of these Trump-era immigration changes as part of the first 100 days of his presidential campaign. If Trump remains the president, he will probably try to push forward with the H-1B lottery being based from highest pay to lowest pay, which is great if you can get yourself a really high-paying job. But I imagine there would be a lot of litigation, and recently a court said that he was engaging in a monarchical abuse of power. So, whether this change can persist, I doubt it. So it's definitely worth using every chance to be in the lottery possible. There's been a lot of other things about immigration in the news as well. If any of you need to travel internationally, I still don't advise it unless it's some sort of life or death situation, because it's very difficult to get a visa to return. And so, but there are ways to do it. So if you had to go back home for some reason before getting your H-1B, you might be able to qualify for something called a national interest exception to still get a visa and come back in. And there are certain professions that qualify for this. Things that might apply to you guys are if you've been living in the US and you're coming back home to continue working here, if you're a specialist, a manager, or an expert, if you're in the critical infrastructure sector. Your campus is right by Moffett Field, so I don't know, maybe there's an interested US government agency, high wage, or if the company is going to face financial hardship without you. People are getting visas these days, but it's tough because they have to prove this first. And there's also other litigation, which basically means that if your employer, so if any of you go to work for Google or Apple, they're all in this professional trade group called TechNet. Otherwise, and that's pretty exclusive, but there's another organization, the US Chamber of Commerce, that any small business can join for $250 a year. And so any members of those organizations are part of a lawsuit that then qualify to get unlimited visas. So it's a huge patchwork right now. Okay, other things that recently happened, be mindful of time, are that they tried to toughen the definitions for specialty occupation, meaning that if they believe your job doesn't require a bachelor's degree, they can deny an H-1B visa. That's under litigation. And then there's also a movement to, they made this effective within 36 hours after the announcement. These rules are supposed to have months of due process leading up to them. But this one says that this one raised the minimum wage for H-1Bs by about 25 to 30%. And they made a bunch of mistakes when they did it. And this is under litigation too. So I think that for any of you who are in F1 right now, let's get through today, let's get through this week, let's figure out who the president's going to be. Probably all the dust on this H-1B stuff will clear by next spring, and you should just use every chance you can get to be put into that H-1B lottery. So that's what it means. Like, keep trying, don't be dismayed. There's a lot of fear mongering. Don't let it get to you. I know it can feel hard to have a thick skin sometimes, but we still have laws. We still have a constitution. They can't just, cancel these things that were created by law. So there's got to be ways to do it. And there's a lot of hacks and alternatives, which I know some of you had questions about, and I'll just give an overview and we can dive into all of this more later in the Q&A. There's something called cap-exempt H-1Bs. So this could be a really great solution for startup founders. I want big tech companies to start doing this. There's a way that nonprofits affiliated with universities can get people H-1Bs at any time of year with no lottery, regardless of where they're from. And there's an organization that we're using to help a lot of startup founders get these H-1B visas. the way it works is that the company gives a donation to the nonprofit. The nonprofit places you as the teacher of a group project at a tech company, like your startup or the company that's employing you, and you work with a group of students. For example, like community college students or students that don't have access to good STEM education. And you work with those students 5 hours a week virtually to lead a project so that you can get your first H-1B through this nonprofit that doesn't have to go through the lottery. And then your company can get a second H-1B for you without the lottery as well. So if you're running out of STEM OPT and you have a great job and you don't know how to stay, please remember that there is a way to get an H-1B without the lottery, which is super, super exciting. There's also a ton of other visa options. The O-1 is really popular for startup founders and people who have business experience, patents, people who have an academic research background. So if you have some professional experience before joining Carnegie Mellon, you may already qualify for one of these O-1 visas. It's very particular. Like we could say that you're the best healthcare IoT founder of your home country of Iceland. And if we can get some evidence about that, you could get this working visa with no lottery. So that's a really valuable one. And then there's certain countries that have very special visas. So that includes Canada and Mexico and Australia and Chile and Singapore. And then there's also visas based on treaties. So many Western European countries, Australia, Japan have treaties. And if you're a citizen of one of those countries, you can actually get an investor visa to create a startup. So there's a lot of creative ways to do it, and it really depends on your end goal and what type of work you want to do here. And we can email this to you if it's okay with you, Lauren, but we started a class on Teachable called Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp for the O-1, which is basically like I recorded 15 hours of courses. I have so much respect for the faculty who teach online classes. It was really hard, but there's basically 15 videos that do a deep dive into all of those O-1 criteria and what type of evidence you need and creative ways for you to get it. And then sometimes we have really highly motivated companies that are just like, we'll do the H-1B, but we're also going to sponsor our people for green cards right away, even when they're on OPT. And so there's a lot of type of work-based green cards to know about. Most people who work at big tech companies are only familiar with EB2 and EB3, EB3 for bachelor's degrees and EB2 for master's degrees. Some people get EB5 investor visas. That's now $900,000 minimum. But the world I love to hang out in is up here, because the visas are based on your past accomplishments and what you're going to contribute to America in the future. And a lot of startup founders and people in tech meet these requirements. And so these are lovely visas because many of them you can get by yourself without being an investor, without marrying an American, without getting a job offer. So they're a really attractive way that you could potentially get a green card by yourself one day. And if you're in love to an American or somebody with a green card, don't forget that you can get a visa or a green card through your marriage. Less so these days, but I have had many people, men too, who are like, I'm a feminist. I'm going to do this based on my own merit. I don't want to depend on my wife. And they already have kids. But I mean, I think these days, if this is an option for you, if you have a good faith marriage, go for it. It's way faster and easier than getting a green card through a startup or a tech company. And then I started a nonprofit this summer when we thought that all of the international students were going to be kicked out of the country, because I had students coming to me asking for help who couldn't afford it, or they couldn't afford plane flights back home. And I had people reaching out saying, hey, how can I donate to international students and help international students in need? And my co-founder, who's a YC alum, and I realized there's no way there's no hub to support international students. So we created the Community for Global Innovation, and we're asking companies to take the pledge that they're not going to discriminate against international students in their hiring process so that everybody has a chance. And we need student volunteers. We need companies to take the pledge. We have a lot of roles of like redeveloping our homepage and creating a forum and getting companies to take the pledge. So there's a lot. If you would like to volunteer, we would love your support. You can email me. And yeah, we'll be sharing this this chart with you, which path to the US is right for me. And we're on social media. I have a podcast you can subscribe to. It's called Immigration Law for Tech Startups. And you can also read my weekly column in Dear Sophie in TechCrunch. And I think I did it. I think I did it in less than 30 minutes. So yay.
That was impressive. You got to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there were some questions about how to hear this presentation afterwards. So just so you all know, I included a link in the chat box so you know where to find this after the fact. But so fabulous. That was a really great introduction to lots of the questions that came in. So thank you for that, Sophie. And everyone who's on the call, we're now going to jump into Q&A. So there's some questions that were submitted, but feel free if you have other questions, either about things that Sophie presented on, or maybe you have some other questions, feel free to submit them. We're going to start with some questions that were submitted in advance. So, Sophie, you had talked a little bit about this in a slide deck around just H-1B and some of the changes that are expecting. And we got lots of questions ahead of time about how will these changes to H-1B visa rules influence or impact international students. Questions about, I'm graduating soon. There seems to be some concern from the students on this call around just how will this impact? So you talked a little bit about that in the slides, but maybe you could expand on that a little now.
Sure. I think the biggest thing is psychological in negotiating a job offer. I think that's the biggest thing, because I mean, I can tell you that nothing has really changed and judges are going to get rid of all of this, or Biden will get rid of all of this. But the reason these messages are so powerfully are in the news is because they wanted to create, fear and have a certain effect for the election. So what many employers may have on the top of their minds is, I don't want to go near that. So then it becomes your job to be self-aware, to understand the field, to pitch them about why the investment of time and energy and money that they need to make into hiring you is well worth it, because you are going to give back so much more to their company. And sometimes people are like, do I bring it up? Do I not bring it up? I've seen it happen both ways. A lot of job application websites ask at the beginning, do you require immigration sponsorship? And they can legally decline you based on that. So it may be valuable to try to network and get, personal introductions for jobs. And if they don't ask, or if you get through that to the interview, then it's something to bring up towards the end after you're already pretty sure they want to hire you. And then that's where it's, good to say, like, hey, yes, there's this immigration thing, but look, here's what I need. It's $10 for you to put me in the lottery this year and every year after that. If you want to engage a lawyer, we can do that. I have names. And, my path to a green card is so and so many years long, and this is what the milestones would look like. And I think what most employers want to hear, or most of them are afraid that they're going to spend all this extra money on you and you're just going to quit and go to some other company. And so if you can just convince them that, I love your company, I love your mission, this is a long-term job for me, I would love to stay with you, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I mean, that sounds really outrageous in today's environment where people hop around from job to job in like 2 years or 1.5 years. But that's one of their biggest fears. So there's a lot of ways that you can mitigate that and make yourself really attractive as a candidate.
And along those same lines, there were some questions that were submitted in the chat box about, when is a good time to ask for that, right? Is it after the offer's already been made and before the offer letter's been written? Is it after the offer letter? So just a little bit more nuance around the negotiation question.
I see it in all different ways. So I wouldn't say there's a right way. And I don't want to say I don't know, right? Because it's like, are you just, are you just candid and forthcoming and lay all your cards on the table and ask for mercy and support? Or are you tricking them into giving you an offer? But what their offer should say is, this offer is contingent on you having valid work authorization. You can't just start working unless you have OPT. I think it's a matter of personality. I'm not a negotiation professor, but I've always erred on the side of, openness, candor. We've got this. Here's the plan, and just gently and lovingly guiding them through.
That's great. So similar, we'll kind of stick to the H-1B question since we're on that track now. There were some questions that were submitted in advance and also in the chat box around the EB2, EB1, and just sort of understanding, and you spoke a bit about this in your slides, but can you speak a little bit more about maybe which is a better route to take compared to H-1B?
Yeah, sure. So this is about, should you just go straight for a green card or should you mess around with the H-1B lottery? And it really depends. If you were born in India or China, you're going to have a longer relative wait time to get a green card. So anything you can do sooner on the green card front is very, very helpful. But it can also mean that if you wanted to travel back home on an F1 visa and come back in on OPT, they might not let you back in. So it's only a good strategy if you're okay with being in the US until you get a dual intent visa like an H-1B, because we don't want you to get stuck outside on a trip. Or if you're just planning on staying here. And with COVID, that's a lot easier. Nobody's really traveling these days. So the EB2, so there's certain, if you think you might qualify for an EB1A green card for extraordinary ability or an EB2 national interest waiver green card, and you're still a student and you have 3 years of OPT ahead of you, and you're not going to travel and you're not from India or China, then I would say it may be wise to just start a green card process for yourself by yourself now if you meet all of those factors. But even if you do that, I would still say try to get an H-1B in parallel, because it's a better landing pad for when your STEM OPT expires, and it's just good to have that as a backup. So we see both, but I'm a maximizer. Just maximize all the options. If you have it, take it.
Great way of looking at it, maximizer. Love it. And then switching gears a little bit. So we spoke a bit about how students can, what the path may be for working for a company. And there were lots of questions submitted about what if I want to start my own company? So how to become an immigrant founder and start a company under OPT. And I know this was actually a topic that you came and spoke about pre-COVID on campus.
Yeah.
So I know you did a whole presentation on that. And this is one answer to one question. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
If Biden wins, I may have been an editor for something that might relate to a new green visa or green card for startup founders. So that would be very, 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 very exciting. I really hope that happens. In the meantime, yes, you can start a company after you graduate. You have the most leeway to do whatever you want on that first year of OPT. And it depends on your long-term strategy. Like if you want to get an H-1B after your OPT is done, you have to set up your company a little bit differently than if you want just an O visa or a green card by yourself. It is doable. Some of the things to figure out are, what is your company going to do? Will you have co-founders? What country are they from? Do they also need immigration help? Are any of you guys American? Who needs to be the CEO? Who's the CTO? Do you have any wiggle room with who is in which role for an immigration standpoint? How much equity are you each going to have? What is your fundraising plan? How quickly do you think you'll have money? Like for some visas, like the H-1B, it's very valuable to have 50 or 100 or 200K in the bank account before you file. Other visas, it doesn't matter. So it's totally doable. There's also that transition between OPT and STEM OPT where we have to bring in the training plan and make sure there's an employee on staff who's supervising you. And there's various ways to do that in a startup where you're the founder and the CEO. But some of it can get a little wonky, and there's no like one size fits all model. It really depends on your business and your partners and your fundraising objectives, because everybody's a little bit different.
Well, if that letter comes out, or if that article comes out, I'm sure that we can hopefully send that out to students and follow it.
Well, this would be like Congress passing a law.
Oh, okay. This would be a little.
Don't hear about it.
I thought you meant you had written an article about it that would be coming out.
I just helped write a law. That's all.
Oh, well, just help write a law. Oh my gosh. Along those similar lines, and you spoke about this a bit throughout your talk today, but maybe you could just give a little bit more focus to this around just what is expected from this election. I mean, how could in either direction, how could this impact the future of immigration in this country?
Yes, great question. So I have an article I just wrote this morning that's being published sometime today. I don't think it exists yet. We can share it with you when it's available. But oh no, here it is. No, different one. Sorry, too many articles. So if Trump wins, we're going to see more of the same. We're going to see more restrictions on the H-1B. Fortunately, they don't seem to realize that there's other types of visas that people can use. Like, it's just a PR thing because somehow the H-1B is because of the perception in the American population of H-1B workers stealing jobs from Americans. That is the political target. There are tons of other visa types that can be used. So I would expect a bunch of lawsuits about the H-1B lottery and whether it will be random or based on highest to lowest salary. If that happens and you want to work at a startup and you're the founder, you're just going to have to pitch to your investors that your higher salary is required and you're going to make more than a 60K average founder in Silicon Valley. Because by law, you're required to receive a certain wage from the company. So you can keep that in mind when you're pitching and raising. But it's just going to be more tweets and more restrictions. I hope if that continues, that sometime early next year, visas will become available again and people will be able to start getting green cards in other countries. They can still get green cards within the United States. So kind of just more of the same, except it looks like the House is leaning Democrat. So I don't think comprehensive immigration reform is on the agenda for the next 4 years under Trump. So he had talked about doing a points-based merit immigration system, but I don't think that will have a chance anymore. So my biggest hope is that since the election's over, they'll just forget about immigration and not care about it as much anymore and stop doing things to it. So that's the best case scenario there. And then under a Biden administration, there's so many good things that could happen for Silicon Valley and tech and businesses, which is really interesting because, you know, the Democratic Party isn't historically associated with being pro-business, but they want to support immigrant entrepreneurship programs. They want the startup visa. They want to make it easier for people to keep their professional licenses from other countries. So if you were a doctor back home, making it easier to become a doctor in the United States. They want to remove the wait times for people on employment-based green cards for China and India. Basically, anybody with a PhD from the United States would be able to get a green card without waiting. So a lot of things in that agenda would be wonderful for this group. So I hope it happens. Yeah.
We'll have to tune in right after this talk and see what's happened in the last hour. I really like this question, just along similar lines. A student asked, as immigrants, how can we influence the laws to become more favorable toward immigrants? I thought it was a great question.
I love that. Thank you. That's wonderful. Yes, please. Well, don't vote. You're not allowed to vote. Don't register to vote until you become a citizen. So stay far away from that. But you can lobby. You can call your member of Congress, your senator. They care about all of the people who live in their district, not just the voters in their district. And they want to hear your opinion. And there's a lot of organizations. This is a really big need, actually. Reporters come to me constantly saying, Sophie, I need somebody to talk to who can tell me about their story for this piece I'm writing. And because a lot of people historically have been afraid to take a stand or nervous about going public, the media hasn't been able to tell all of the stories that are available because people are scared and they don't know who to talk to. So I'm actually going to share, I'm going to put a link in the chat window. So if you feel inclined to be part of my database of people who are willing to talk to reporters, you are welcome to join it. And you can put whatever information you want in there. It's in the chat window that you would like disclosed. This is not confidential. So whatever you put in there, please treat it as if, you know, the world could potentially know. But we really need more voices on the subject. And there's a lot of immigration nonprofits doing really wonderful work, advocacy and supporting immigrants and changing the laws. There's forward.us, which is started in tech, and they're lobbying for legal changes. The National Venture Capital Association cares about this, the Foundation for the New American Economy. So there's a lot of great organizations, and you can volunteer with us at the Community for Global Innovation. We would love to have you and have your support.
Those are excellent suggestions and very tangible suggestions, which is great. And similar question that came through, but a little more directed at Alcorn immigration, was what has Alcorn immigration been? How have you been? What steps have you been taking during the presidential election and just in general to support fair and equitable treatment of immigrants?
Oh my God! Thank you. Yeah. Well. This is a labor of love in a lot of ways. I love being an entrepreneur. I love being in Silicon Valley. There's probably way more scalable, easier businesses to run than herding a bunch of lawyers to provide excellent customer service in one of the most difficult administration and legal environments in history for immigrants. So I have a podcast, Immigration Law for Tech Startups. I publish a weekly podcast, deep dive interviews with experts, library of free immigration information at your fingertips. We started the Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp because there were so many people who wanted O1 visas and to get green cards by themselves. And it was like, well, you still need to do X, Y, and Z before I feel comfortable, because I don't want to take a chance and file something for you that might get denied. But I didn't have any way to support those people. So now we've launched this boot camp, which I'm really excited about. Starting the nonprofit, trying to find creative ways to do H-1B hacks through this foundation, supporting universities to support their students, doing pro bono and low bono work in select situations, working with nonprofits, representing dreamers. We try to do a lot, and I don't know. It's I woke up this morning at 6:30 a.m. with like, okay, what do I write about the election? I just want to stay in bed, but I have to write something in TechCrunch because when Trump was gonna kick out all the students this summer, I was getting LinkedIn messages of like, Sophie, tell us what to do. We need help. And like, really, guys? Do I have to do this? Fine, okay. So I like tucked my kids into bed and put on makeup and recorded a video, which led to the nonprofit being formed. So yeah, lots of things.
You keep yourself busy, and I mean, important work that you're doing, and just thank you for everything. I mean,
thank you.
I'm, like I said at the beginning, we're so delighted that you get to speak with us today. And I mean, we have a couple of additional questions that came through, and I know that some of you on the call have class that you have to get to. So if you need to log off, just go for it. I do want to get to some of these last other questions that we have. So this is a recording. So if you missed the last part, you can always go back and rewatch it. But a couple questions came through that are going back to some things we had talked about earlier. And one of the questions just was wanting to understand a little bit more of the difference between O1 and EB1. There was some confusion there. Like they felt like it was kind of
easy one.
Not quite sure.
An O1 is a temporary work visa. It's valid for 3 years. It's good for one company or an itinerary of different projects you're going to work on. You have to have a company sponsor you. And then after 3 years, you can renew it 1 year at a time. EB1 is a path to a green card. So it's basically you become a permanent resident because you met the same extraordinary ability requirements.
Great. And then another question, we hear this a lot actually, is students who are really interested in what this student said is really cool, hardcore tech projects that otherwise are only open to US citizens. So especially things like in the government or military applications. So do you see any kind of workaround or way that students can work with those kinds of organizations?
I get a couple of those questions every week. The best way is to find an intermediate solution that is not subject to like ITAR and export control regulations. You can get an H-1B or an O-1, but then you have to go through a separate process of getting an export control license for you as a person to be able to work on the technology. So that's a strategy, but the bigger issue I see is that, because I was just talking to somebody who has a green card and is still in the same situation. I was like, you got a green card, like what's the deal? Do you need to become a citizen now? And he's like, yeah, the big defense contractors require citizens in their contracts. And so there's like the basic legal threshold, but then companies in contract can also require higher standards. So it's difficult. And the best way is just to start your own green card process for yourself as soon as you qualify. Maybe that EB2 national interest waiver green card I was talking about could be relevant for you. Stay in some tangential thing like self-driving cars or stuff for astronauts. And then as soon as you get the green card, try to pivot, and at least you know you've done everything you could to try.
Well, I think a good kind of closing question is summarizing a few questions into one, which is just that, 2020 has been quite a year for all of us and for students and for international students. It's been a year. I mean, that's not a surprise to anyone here. And I mean, just what closing advice do you have for students who are, specifically international students who are graduating during this time and seeking employment and dealing with the pandemic? So just some closing remarks.
Sure. Well, my dad's voice is coming into my head, but it's a bad word. He would say, I'm going to say it though. He would say to me, "So don't let the bastards get you down." So that was his advice to me. I'm really sorry that I swore in a recording, but I don't know how to explain that statement without it. And it's not that bad. Okay. So look, I still firmly believe that anybody can create anything they want. If you have a goal, there's ways to achieve it. And okay, maybe some boulders fell onto the path and we have to figure out a way around it, or maybe there's a branch and we have to lift it up or saw through it to, go past it. But where there is a will, there's a way. I was thinking about this morning that I was at a super low point in my life before I founded this law firm, because I gave up my career to take care of my 2 little kids. I had no support. I had undiagnosed depression and postpartum depression and PTSD. And I didn't have a network in Silicon Valley, and my dad died and my marriage fell apart and I was going to be a single mom, and I didn't know how to survive in Silicon Valley. And that seemed like a very, very, very difficult situation to be in. And it was one of those things where I was washing baby dishes, looking out the window in Mountain View and be oh, it's so close, but it's so far away. I had no connections. I didn't know any startup founders or any venture capitalists or anybody. And that was 5 years ago. And you heard my bio. I've done all of that stuff in the last 5 years. And I just decided. It's just deciding. If you can decide with great clarity what it is you actually want, the rest of the pieces are just a matter of details, and they can always fall into place. So I know it's doable. You came to CMU for a reason. You're brilliant. You're capable of so many things. The world needs you. We need your talents. We need your expertise. We need your creativity. We need people who care. And where there's a will, there's a way.
Oh, that was amazing. This is where I want to look at the audience when no one can see me and just be isn't Sophie amazing? No one can see me, but I'm sure that, or no, I can't see what they're saying, but I'm sure they're all yes, she's amazing. That was just incredible. And thank you for just how candid you are and transparent and sharing your own story in the midst of also giving advice to students here, because it's just appreciated to hear where you came from. And yeah, so thank you. And thank you for this fabulous talk today. So you continue to remain a friend of CMU. And if there's anything we can do to support your organization, and we'll share all of this with students, all the links that you shared, and the volunteer link for your nonprofit. We'd love to share that with students as well. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all the participants and attendees for being here today. And if you're watching this after the fact, thank you. Now, everybody go get some rest, enjoy the rest of the day. And Sophie, it was a real pleasure to have you with us today for our final speaker event.
Thank you. And anybody can reach out to me at any time if there's anything I can do to support you.